Hi everybody. So I'm Tracey Abayeta. I'm very happy to be here today and be part of this discussion. So thank you for the invitation. So I studied economics with French at the University of Nottingham many years ago, and actually started my career in banking. So I worked in debt capital markets at Citi, so which is financing, effectively investment banking, and I spent about 6 years there. So went through the analyst training program, the associate training program, and then after my first maternity leave, I actually left the world of banking and joined a charity organisation called SEO London. So that was the charity that helped me actually break into the industry and was really instrumental in kind of my development. So I basically went there to run their investment banking and asset management program. So thought I would probably be there just 6 months, ended up staying again close to 6 years, and really kind of helped build out a lot of the programs there. And I think kind of, one of the things that I'm really proud of is, I, under my leadership, we were able to launch the Her Capital female leadership program. And that was kind of just aiming to get more kind of improving the confidence and increasing the confidence of women, female students on campus in an innovative way. So I was at SEO London. Lazard, where I am now, they were actually one of the first sponsors of the program. And when I came back from maternity leave with my daughter last year, I found out that there was an opportunity to do a maternity cover, and that's kind of how I ended up at Lazard. So I'm currently doing a 12-month maternity cover. Also founded my business whilst I was on maternity leave called Opportunity Central. So do that alongside, and great to be here today. So that's a bit about my background. Thank you.
So could you explain a bit more about what Opportunity Central is?
Sure. So ultimately it's a consultancy firm. So kind of working with firms to help on talent development programs, but also under that banner, we also run training programs for industry professional students. For instance, last month, we run a webinar about how to unlock the value of your network, running another one next week. So training. And then the other element is that kind of if you're following us on social media, the aim is that we want to help students navigate their professional careers at university more strategically. So really passionate about people knowing about the things that are available to them. A lot of the times you see things on LinkedIn, people posting about all their amazing achievements. And sometimes you think, well, how come I didn't hear about this? And it tends to be that, a lot of the times it's, that information is kept if you happen to be in the right circles. So maybe, the right groups where you get wind of information. But I guess what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that regardless of your social network, if you are proactive and you follow Opportunity Central, then you will be kept up to date with lots of opportunities, and regardless of what university you go to, and if you're passionate and you're proactive, then you should be able to navigate university effectively. So yeah.
Okay, and can we have an introduction from Chib, please?
Hi guys. So my name is Chib. I study computer science at Warwick University, and I'm entering my final year. So in terms of like career, I guess obviously I'm much younger than Tracey, so my career, is still, in the works. But I think so far I've been able to, so I did a spring week at Goldman in my first year, and then I also did a summer internship at Standard Chartered Bank over the summer. And this summer I'll be doing my summer at JP Morgan, and this is all within the tech division. So yeah, that's kind of like about me. I'm hoping to either go into tech, either within an investment bank or within a tech firm, like probably like Google or Facebook, that kind of sort of company. So yeah, I'm also founder of an organization to tap into tech, which was kind of started within the University of Warwick, and we're essentially just trying to help educate people and upskill them, just so that we can help to bridge this inequality gap that is very, very obvious and prevalent within the tech sector. So yeah.
Okay, and Alice? Oh, she's muted. Yeah.
Yeah, just unmuted, I think. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Alice. I am a third-year student in geography at Durham University. I yeah, have sort of accidentally ended up on a trajectory into consulting. So I'm very lucky to have an offer from McKinsey to start working in October. And my broad range of interests, like I worked at Amazon last summer, so I guess that's sort of like a little bit about tech. I worked for a tech startup before that, which you may be wondering where that links into geography. I don't really know is the answer, but I'm looking into sort of going into government policy going forward. And while I was at Durham, well, I'm still here technically, I launched Lean In, which is a circle of young women which hopes to sort of address inequalities in the workplace. And I don't think that the workplace is often a space that's considered within university circles that much, and there's a huge amount on the gender equality side that happens on campus, and there's a huge amount to be done in campus terms in itself, but often it provides an appropriate introduction to sort of like workplace gender inequalities, and takes those kind of grievances quite seriously on campus, which often isn't a space where those kinds of things are considered. So that's a bit about me.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a bit of a more general question, and maybe it's something I kind of noticed when I got to Britain, right? So we're going to be talking a lot today, mostly about gender, but also the spaces of where race comes into play with that. So I realized that when I got to Britain, that a lot of British culture is not about not talking about certain things, about being quite polite, euphemistic, things like that. And in many ways, I think the UK kind of sees itself as post-race, and we saw that in the fallout from the George Floyd murder, that a lot of British media framed it as a uniquely American problem. And I think this is the case even that with diversity. It's quite a sugar-coated conversation about race in many ways. I went to a conversation last week where they didn't even mention the term once, even though it was a diversity event. So I kind of wonder, do you agree that this is how British culture kind of talks about race? And if so, how do you think this manifests in your workplaces or work environments? So anyone can start with that.
I'm happy to start off on that. So I think, first of all, I think race is something that a lot of people find very uncomfortable talking about. So, and also I think maybe just be unaware of. So I think when everything broke out with George Floyd, actually probably to many in the UK, they probably didn't understand when they may have been hearing comments that actually there may be Black colleagues in your firms that are actually quite traumatized by what's going on, and because they probably just assume that, oh, you know, we don't have a problem with police brutality here in the UK, so obviously, you know, you would never see somebody, you know, kneeling on a man's neck, and that just doesn't happen, and this is just clearly a US thing. But I think actually what it pointed to was more just actually a lot of the challenges that you know, Black people face in the workplace. And I think, you know, even if you don't, you know, overtly see it, I think the fact that, you know, you don't have any representation at really senior levels, or it's very, very limited, but it's not as a result of there not being competent Black people, we have to ask ourselves the questions why. Like, why do we not see many of them rising? Or why do people feel that actually in order for them to really be successful in life, they have to kind of opt out and set up their own businesses because they're not able to navigate the corporate world? So I think, yes, race is very difficult to talk about, but actually I think what's happened with George Floyd is that, and also Amy Cooper, because I think, again, that was, you know, a woman who was head of a division in a firm that, again, many Black people will find themselves in. And as head of division, you're looking at things like promotions and things like that. So I think actually what it did is it shone a light and has now opened a dialogue. So I think, you know, people are finding that they're having to, you know, put out these statements, have these uncomfortable conversations. But I think for me, what my hope is that actually this is just the start of a continuous debate. And it's not that, oh, once we've had this discussion with our employees, it's a checkbox, we can move on. But actually, it's getting us comfortable. And I think with that comes education. So, you know, actually being able to, and not everybody will be able to, because some people, because of their experiences, they're too traumatized to unpack that. But I think there will be some people in the Black community in this instance that can actually be a voice to help people in, people in those leadership positions really understand the challenges that, you know, people in the Black community face. So yes, I think actually what's happened now is a really interesting time, and it's different because it seems that people are listening and people are willing to take action. So
Okay. And Chib, do you have any thoughts, or Alice, either of you?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. I wanted to say that I think that the idea of us not talking about race, I think it's very difficult because I think talking about race requires some sort of like self-admittance, and I think that it can be quite difficult as a white person to, especially if you maybe feel like you're not actively racist. It might be difficult for you to kind of understand that there are things that it's not enough to just be not racist. You need to be actively anti-racist. And I think the understanding of what systematic racism is, and being able to do things that help to combat this, I think that's important. But because I think a lot of people don't feel that they are racist, I feel like they don't feel like there's a need to discuss these things. But I think that we need to do more rather than just not be racist. We need to do things that help to kind of like break down this systemic racism that is kind of like currently occurring within workplaces, within schools, etc. So yeah.
Can I just ask you a bit more about that? So I agree definitely everything you said. We need to be actively anti-racist. So my question is, I think a lot of these things, when you are not someone who is being marginalized, so say you're a white man or something like that, it's very easy to fall back on your old habits because you're not actively experiencing it. So how do you suggest to people that they can actively be anti-racist and not simply fall back to their old habits without something really disturbing like George Floyd's murder or some repetition of that happening again, and rather have that be an active part of their everyday life?
Yeah, so I would say that like the first step is just talking about these kind of things, like you said, in British culture is kind of like we like to euphemize a lot of things and not necessarily talk about these things. But I think it's important that we talk about race. People often even feel uncomfortable using the term black, but it is what it is. We have to talk about it. There aren't a lot of black people in certain spaces, and if there are, how do we make them feel comfortable? These are just conversations that we need to not shy away from, because in shying away from them and in trying to appear somewhat conservative, I think what we're actually doing is helping to perpetrate this systematic racism that occurs.
Yeah, and I think just on that, I think the education piece is so important. So even for instance that like people, white people, all types of people need to know that actually to say black, that's allowed. And some people may not know because of, maybe they've never interacted with black people before and they don't know what is acceptable, what's not. So I think in as much as where we can, there's an education that's required on both sides. And actually, there are a lot of firms that are doing a lot of D&I, but actually when you're creating your D&I strategy, you need to have the represented voices around the table, because, if I'm trying to design a world where a blind person can fit in and be adaptable, and I'm not blind, I won't know the challenges of what it's like to be blind. So there will be certain things that I would just oversee or assume. So I think it's really important that actually representation, it really doesn't matter, because if I'm represented at the table, if there's a table that's only men, they're not going to be thinking about what happens to me when I get pregnant. But if I've been pregnant and you're making all these, I'll say, no, but wait a minute, what about this scenario? Because I'm coming from a place of empathy. So that's why actually it's so important to be able to listen and that education to take place. And I think that will be increasingly more important as we kind of work through everything that's happening with the debate around race in the workplace.
Yeah, actually, can I bring Alice into this conversation? Because I remember you were kind of saying exactly with the pregnancy story. Can you tell a bit more about like reading that story and how that made you perhaps change your perspective on I guess, empathizing with other people's experiences?
Yeah, okay, so this is basically a story that's mentioned in the Lean In book about how Sheryl Sandberg, who was sort of the CEO of Facebook and the person that wrote the sort of Lean In book and started up this whole chapter. So she basically said that when she got pregnant, she didn't realize what the needs of a pregnant woman would be until she actually got pregnant and started to experience it and empathize and understand that actually she would appreciate a parking space that was closer to the office. And I think this is completely echoing what you said, Tracey, in terms of the empathy and the understanding and the attempts of trying to sort of see things from someone else's perspective. And the reality of it is you can sort of try as much as you want, but if you don't have those voices, there's no way that you're actually going to know until that dialogue is kept completely open and there's enough comfort for everyone, every single voice around the table, to be able to speak completely openly and frankly about their experiences. And and you won't know until you're told. So bringing as many voices and diverse voices into that dialogue as possible, I think is one of the best things. And maybe that could be around a table, that could be around like a chat, having coffee with someone. It could be anything that's very formal, like a board, or it could be something very informal. But just the attempt at trying to make those voices sing in a way, I think is really important. I actually just want to add on that point, the reason I've stayed quiet obviously is because I don't feel potentially as well equipped to deal with this question, and I want to make sure that sort of I'm coming from a position of white privilege. I mean, I'm a woman, and we can discuss these sort of like discriminations in that sense, but I have, along with as many white allies as possible, trying to sort of train ourselves to be actively anti-racist. And I think this is the beginning of a really, really important moment of history. It's a very focal moment of how we can sort of take this tragedy and this moment of news, and actually this can begin a process rather than it just being something that stays in the news and stays in the news cycle. And we need to actively keep up this persistence of news cycles and trying to make these changes, because of take down the system in a way. And I think that as this is a moment of acknowledgement, I think we have to build on it, and keep the momentum going wherever possible.
And actually, I think one of the things around the whole gender debate, which has made a lot of progress in kind of the years, is, you know, somebody mentioned, is that actually when we look at gender, you know, the reason why actually men can, it's been easier for them to come on board, if we say, let's say the race one, is that actually they can probably identify with having a female in their life. So if it's their mother, they have a daughter, and once kind of they cross over, or they start thinking about it in an empathetic way, it's much easier to sympathize with the cause. Whereas if it comes to a race issue, you may never ever experience what it's like to be Black. You know, if maybe, let's say, to an extent, if you have, you know, a relationship, and then, you know, you have children of, you know, different ethnicities, then fine, maybe you have that sympathy, that sympathy now becomes a bit more ingrained. But actually, that's why education is so important, because you may never actually know what it's like to be a Black person unless you actually sit down and listen to the lived experiences of others. And the other thing on the flip side is that I would also say to the Black communities that I think sometimes people base the reality based on their lived experience. So they will say that, oh, I've never had any issues, so that it doesn't exist. And I think actually that's just very unfair, because what you do is that actually we know that it is a problem. And just because you haven't experienced it, you cannot use that to stop progress from happening, or debates or authentic conversations from happening, because you are that one person that hasn't lived this, when we're clearly seeing that this is a nationwide problem based on everybody else's experiences. So I think, again, there are some people that are like, oh yeah, it's not a problem, so I'm not going to speak up about it. But actually we have to acknowledge that if these are the stories that are coming out of the woodwork, then we have a problem. And until that becomes nobody's experience, we can't just sit still and be like, there's no work to be done.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I completely agree with everything you're saying, but I think that one thing that's been quite a big point of conflict for me is just this idea that empathy comes from having authentic conversations, and it does. But then I don't know, because then I think about like the fact that I've had to consciously go out of my way to see what other people are experiencing and ingraining the empathy in myself. It's very much a self-work thing that I've been doing since I've been young, and that's just the norm. And then I feel like quite often when we have conversations about race, often like not my white friends, but like my white like peers and stuff would say, well, I've never been with Black people or people of color, so then because I've never heard any of their experiences, I don't really have the basis to build empathy on. But then Black people or people of color have to build that empathy, but they don't build it just from hearing from the white community. They go out and do the work themselves. So quite often I feel like sometimes it's used as an excuse a lot, and that's something that I've noticed. But like obviously it's not for everyone. I just wanted to say that just because it just came into my head.
Yeah, does anybody wanted to address that? Or
sorry, Tolu, you said is the point that actually it's not just through listening to stories in terms of being able to educate yourself and be able to build that empathy. There's other things that you as the individual you can take individual responsibility to do that, and not use not having a network of Black people that you can talk to as an excuse.
Pretty much that. Yeah, exactly. Because there are quite a lot of Black people that grow up in quite Black communities, but somehow have found a way to have empathy for their white peers and go out of their way to educate people on their own experiences, when the same really isn't being done in return. And that's just the way that society works, definitely. But then it just feels like quite often, I would be sharing my experience and someone would be like, well, I've never heard of it like that. And like, I know that they haven't, but it just feels so unfair sometimes, because I've had to go out of my way and take the individual responsibility to learn about them, but then the same isn't really expected.
Yeah, and I think that's what's changing, right? Like, I think you're seeing resources being posted, things that people can use, read documentaries. I think that is all in a bid for people to be able to take personal responsibility. And I think, you know, we're now going to be even seeing it challenged in the education system. So actually, what are people learning about history? You know, do people know why we actually have Black people in this country? Like, do they know the real truth about the slave trade? Like, these are all things that are going to become real debates. And this too will help inform people kind of about, you know, actually why the system is like it is as we see it today, because that's all history, right? And yes, I think actually there will be more of people having to take that kind of individual responsibility, but not only that, it will be accessible. Like, if they want to, they will be able to find out where they can find this information. Whereas I think before it's kind of just been hidden, or, you know, not really easily accessible.
Yeah, and so I did realize this, like, when I got to the UK, right? Because when I was in China, I was the majority, but once I got to the UK, like, you're suddenly expected to explain lots of things, and like, if you're not white, people just kind of turn to you to like respond specifically about their questions, and you're meant to have the answers, which I also think is a very problematic view to have, I guess, a very large burden to put onto someone. But I do want to like push the question more towards how the corporate world views diversity. So one of the questions that we did scream by you was that a lot of times when companies talk about diversity, so for instance, Goldman says you need to have women on your board, it's oftentimes about the practical benefits of diversity, having investor returns, things like that. But do you think this is really problematic, since it doesn't frame it as a basic moral case, rather the business case for empowerment? Alice, do you want to kind of talk about this? Because I remember we spoke briefly about this before.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I guess it's more diverse than it just being either a moral case or a business case, because obviously there has to be a degree of moral imperative of having sort of like at least a 50-50 split, or at least being sort of like an accurate representation of the broader of your clients, or if you're a government, you have 50-50 split of genders in sort of your population, and that is sort of basic good leadership to sort of make sure that it's sort of your business makeup is reflective of the stakeholders that you're trying to appease or trying to reflect. But yeah, I mean, McKinsey's Women in the Workplace report that was released in 2017 is well worth looking into, because it makes a very strong business case about how having diverse workforces actually do a huge amount for the metrics that you were sort of talking about, the investor returns and those sorts of things. So if you're actually looking at business performances, you can see that there is a huge amount of evidence for that case. But then I think the moral case shouldn't be understated either. I mean, it does seem a bit strange that we're still struggling to get enough diversity on sort of the right tables and the right conversations take place. But yeah, it's kind of the strategy of working out how we do that, and using the moral and the business case sort of vis-a-vis each other, I think is the most appropriate way to do that. But depends who we need to convince, really.
Yeah, and Tracey, you're going to say something earlier, sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, like, I think we do have to remember, when we talk about business organizations, they are businesses. So actually the business case is very important. And I kind of find that actually it does make sense when we're looking at service-based sectors in particular, because ultimately for a lot of those organizations, what you're selling is ideas, perspectives. Like, you know, I work at Lazard, we are a financial advisor, and we are literally, our clients are paying us so much money because of our ideas and what we can generate, how we can look at a problem and solve it. And it's the same with consulting firms. You're in to solve a problem for your client. So just on that premise, the fact that you have kind of more diverse viewpoints looking at a particular problem implies that actually probably the quality of your solutions are going to be just so much more richer. You know, even if you debate loads of ideas and they get thrown out, but you would have had more options to toy with than if actually everybody was from the same background, same school, taught the same way, studied the same thing, you know, same experience, same life experiences. You just wouldn't be able to extract that if you're just having people from different viewpoints. So for me, and you know, I've experienced this in my personal career journey where, you know, there are certain things that I've brought to the table at a meeting, and I just know for a fact that had I not been in that meeting, it wouldn't have been raised. Not because of, you know, I'm particularly special, but probably because I was very unique in the room and I was just looking at it from a different perspective. So I think when we talk about diversity, yes, diversity is good, but without inclusion, it means nothing. So you can hire 50% women, but if those 50% of women are brought in and they're supposed to conform to the remaining, you know, the 50% of men that are there, then that diversity is not doing anything for you. You know, well, you know, you have, you know, you recruit 10% of them are black, but actually, you know, they're not free to bring themselves to work, or they don't, you know, they're not comfortable to actually voice their opinions of how it's going to be perceived or viewed, then actually that diversity means nothing. So I think it's really important that we're not just thinking about diversity, but actually the different people you have around the table, are they willing to contribute? And not only that, are their views actually considered when you're now trying to, you know, produce a final product or service for your client? So I think that's the most important thing. It's about whether those different voices are empowered to contribute confidently, without fear of it not conforming to, you know, the majority in the room.
Okay, and so I do think that a huge part about whether you feel able to voice yourself is, a lot of it is confidence. So I kind of want to ask to any of you is, you know, women tend to be socialized to be less confident than men. You know, maybe if you're the minority in the room, you might feel like you have more of a spotlight on you. So I just want to ask, have any of you at any point kind of felt very uncomfortable or not confident enough to voice your opinion because you feel like, you know, you might be slightly different or anything like that? And I guess we could start with Chib, because you do work in tech, which is, I think even for like people in finance and consulting, it's seen as super masculine, you know?
Yeah, so yeah, I definitely have a loads and loads of experiences like that, especially just being within the, even like in university, like obviously my course is dominated by boys, men, and in my internship, you know, it's always often dominated by the same, you know, sort of man, you know, so oftentimes being there, I'm often not only one of the only females, but I'm also one of the only, often the only black person, you know, so, you know, it can be very intimidating for me, especially when it comes to like projects and working on very technical things. The way boys come across, or men, sorry, should I say, come across, they have this confidence, some of them have this confidence, especially when they know what they're talking about. And oftentimes to me, I can feel as though, even though I know what I'm talking about and I have the intelligence, I don't feel comfortable enough to propose an idea. I don't feel confident enough to even disagree with somebody else's idea, just because I feel a little bit marginalized. I don't feel like I don't know, I just don't feel, you know, but I think the way I combat that is I have to remind myself that, you know, if I've got a position, or if I'm doing an internship, or I'm doing something, it's because, you know, I qualify for it. You know, so even though I might look different to the other people there, it doesn't take away from the fact that I have enough qualifications, I have the same level of intelligence as these people. And so that kind of helps to encourage me to, you know, say what I want to say, because at the end of the day, you know, I can't be told off. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's not because I'm black, it's not because I'm a girl. If I'm wrong, it's because I'm wrong, if that makes sense.
Okay, and I guess in Tap into Tech, can you speak more specifically? Like, I know you aim to increase in quality, but how do you do that? Is that through specific training programs, or is that also through more interpersonal elements such as confidence?
So yeah, so what we're trying to do is help people pick up the technical skills that they need. So we help teach them how to code and stuff. We also go through things like mentorship programs, so we can, just mentor you and tell you, kind of give you an experience and help to describe to you, what you might see when you get an internship, how to kind of like navigate it. So I would probably talk about it from my experience, and if I'm mentoring someone that's Black or also a girl, I can definitely kind of relate with her on a more personal level, because I can probably predict that she might go through similar things that I have gone through. So just kind of helping them navigate kind of little maybe microaggressions that you might experience, or feelings of inadequacy, or feelings of intimidation, and how I was able to overcome them. Just kind of helping impart that kind of like confidence into other people as well is a part of what we do.
Okay, and I guess for Alice, when you were doing the Lean In circles, a lot of it was about, support and building certain skills. So can you speak a bit more about how you specifically kind of helped women be more confident, or maybe work against that socialization, which is like, oh, you have to like lay low, or things like that?
Yeah, I just want to say before I start though that your work sounds amazing, and I'm so excited that there are other women that are doing this kind of thing all over the place, because I think, as we spoke over the phone, it needs to be quite sort of bottom up work, I think, is sort of the way that I feel it in sort of our age group at least, and that these sort of grassroots style charities or movements or whatever they are, I think are really important, because it's very much to do with like sort of the culture and a way of thinking. It's all about mindset, really. Like one of my most familiar experiences is like I've sat in a room or like a board meeting with a bunch of other men, and it's not so much that it's uncomfortable and that I feel uncomfortable in my position as being a woman, but it does feel a bit tokenistic. It does feel like I've been put there for a reason, and that I therefore have to speak about like the female grievance, because my role in that room is to be a female rather than to just be there conceptually. And that's quite difficult to do, because I think it means representing a group of people that is really broad and really diverse. Like their experience of being a woman is crazy different. Like, and often the gender divide doesn't really like explain those differences. So I think that it's quite important to sort of move from a sort of cultural level, have these sort of conversations. I think that women on other women, I think, is one of the most powerful things that can be done. I think as we've heard, women lifting up other women and sort of sharing those experiences, it's almost like you need a sort of role model or someone to sort of pioneer your way through a certain industry or certain field for you to see that it's possible. And obviously the role of role models is really important in addressing like the broken rung, which is a term that sort of, it's that last step to sort of get you straight up to sort of like leadership or sort of like a board level position. And it's very much just sort of filtering down that confidence and filtering down that sort of like community, and when you manage to get yourself up to a certain level, it's putting the ladder back down again, so that your people who sort of are representative of the I don't know, the minority that you're part of can also make their way up that ladder themselves. And it's just sort of broadening those networks and proving, and bit by bit, meaning that we're not the only women in the room and that we're not being represented because we're female. I think it's probably the best way of going about it. But that does mean to any women that are listening to help your female colleagues out there. And I think it's a very masculinized thing for women to sort of pit themselves up against other women. And it doesn't have to be like that. If you're a woman who's at a certain level and you're the only woman at that level, sure, enjoy that position of privilege and be proud of yourself for being there, because you've made one hell of an achievement. But also realize that your position is sort of, you should take it for granted, and you should try and pull other women up to that position too, because they're not going to compete with you. They're just going to offer a different perspective. And I don't like the idea that women are sort of, again, socialized to be quite competitive with one another, because it doesn't have to be that way. And most of the women in my life have only ever tried to lift me up and be there for me, even if we're competing for the same thing. So I guess it's just sort of changing your mindset from being competitive into sort of more collaborative, and realizing that the more women are higher up, the better for all women. it doesn't mean that there's one position for a woman and that therefore you have to occupy that position. It actually means there could be a multitude of positions for a multitude of women. And the more women you can get on board, the better.
So can I ask you a bit more about the tokenism? So you're saying that oftentimes you feel like you're in a room to represent all women. How do you think more broadly feeling like you're a token kind of impacts the way that you see yourself and maybe your qualifications for being in that room?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and a really curious one to navigate, because I think when I've been in those kind of positions before, I feel like I am literally representing the gender equality voice. And you therefore, as a woman, feel a responsibility to educate yourself on the sort of statistics and the voice of women. And I'm not even remotely equipped to deal with that kind of thing. I can't even speak for my own voice, let alone most of the voices. Which is why we need to move away from the idea of tokenism and into something. I guess in terms of the way it makes me view myself, it is very much like an imposter syndrome thing. I know this is a term that's bounded around quite a lot, but it is real, and it makes you feel that whatever you say, there has to be sort of friction about it when you have those conversations with other people, and it makes you feel more. It puts you into the category they want you to believe of yourself as a woman. And it's quite hard to work your way out of those mindsets, and they are quite patriarchal. And it takes a lot of reminding yourself that you're there for a reason, and that isn't just because you're a woman, reminding yourself of your achievements. And it's very much, it's a value system. You have to prove to yourself and prove to others that you're there for a reason, and that reason isn't just because you're female. And these are consistent conversations that I've had with many female colleagues, female friends, who feel that they're only in a certain place because they're female, or they're made to feel like they've only managed to get this internship because they're female and they're just representing that token part. And I hate the fact that we are made to feel like that, because it's just not the case at all. So I guess sort of from a self-awareness perspective, just being very cautious of who you are and really thinking about your own achievements and being confident in those things and reminding yourself of those things, and having the support networks and the friends and the wonderful women in your life to remind you of who you are, aside from being a woman.
Yeah, I do remember, like, after I got a few springs, I didn't have a single woman tell me this, that I had multiple guys kind of imply to me that the only reason I got it was because I was like a token. No, it's because, like, you're a girl, it's easier, things like that. Not necessarily like even think about my achievements, or they didn't even know my merits. They didn't even know what grades I got and all that. But I just want to bring this question to Tracey, because, when you were building Her Capital, a lot of that was based on confidence. So can you speak a bit more about what you did specifically in that capacity?
Sure. So I did Her Capital, kind of actually founded it after I came back from maternity leave of my second child. And I remember kind of going to a meeting when I was at SEO London, and again, just having the same debate around, we need more women to apply, like, women don't apply to banking, and, we're expected to, get to 50% on the back of, like, a 17%, high teen percentage points in terms of applications. And I remember leaving, being like, I started the industry in 2008, and like, this is the same conversation we were having like back in 2008, and it's now 2016, and we're still having the same conversation. And it kind of seems that actually the solution that everyone's bringing is, let's put another insight day on, or let's, do another female spring week, or whatever it is, without necessarily kind of getting to the crux of the problem. And I think the problem was kind of twofold. So I think one, there was just, yes, people probably, I think there was a perception of the industry and kind of male-dominated industry, or maybe, they needed time to really decide what they wanted to do. And the thing with banking, it had become very pipeline. So if you weren't applying in your first year and you now decide in your third year that you wanted to try it out, it was effectively too late. And that was okay in our day, but now it was kind of even more pipeline. So it was like, how do we get to the females on campus who are evenly populated in academia, to just get them start thinking about, this is an industry. And then the other thing was around the confidence. So, I think, the whole confidence gap thing is real, and even in the workplace. So I think, the program itself was founded on a lot of research, and KPMG's leadership, women leadership study you know, they were saying that actually 76% of women in the workplace, so these are people, they finished uni in the workplace, they wish they had more opportunities to lead when they were younger. So for me, I know we say, we know the term practice makes perfect, but I actually think practice makes confidence. Practice builds confidence. That's what it is. So you find that actually those people that rise to leadership positions in the workplace, if you go further down in, you know, when they were children, they were probably the head girls, or, you know, the sports teams, head of sports teams. They've already practiced leading. And I think kind of the whole point around her capital was that, you know, it was so easy to put on a female insight day and you meet an amazing woman, like, let's say, you know, Sheryl Sandberg, or, you know, somebody running the head of business, and people think, wow, she's so amazing. But then you go back to your room back at uni, into your reality, and actually there was nothing given, being able to allow somebody to empower them with the tools to become the best version of themselves. So I think the great thing about the program is that, yes, it provided a lot of inspiration, but actually more importantly, it gave them the tools to practice leadership in their own environments. So there were challenges that they had to do whilst they were on campus. You know, there were, you know, fundraising that they did on campus. So it was like going through the program, we read Lean In together. So again, learning from the outside and, you know, contributing. And I used to tell her capital associates that even something as contributing in the WhatsApp group, like just literally saying your thoughts, and they'll be like, oh, you know, but I didn't know if, you know, somebody had already said it, so I didn't want to say it. And it's like, no, but you're not going to say it in this environment. So guess what? When you go into the workplace and you're around a table, you're not going to speak. So it's just getting used to practicing, articulating yourself, bringing your voice, letting it be heard, coming to the table. And I think that was the great thing about the program, is that there were so many different ways that people could actually develop themselves, and not only kind of on a day, but over time. So it was, you know, a year-long program. And I think that was probably the most important part, is that it gave people the opportunity to practice it in their own environment, so that now when they go, by the time they get into the world of work, they're just much more confident. And that confidence is actually, you know, a really crucial ingredient in the world of work. That will be the difference as to why you decide to say something and not. That's the reason why you would decide to put your hand up for that opportunity versus not that you believe you have all the skills. It's just you being able to say that, actually, you know what, I'm willing to give this a try.
Sure. And I guess for people who didn't have the opportunity to go into her capital and are just listening now, how would you suggest to them to build that confidence when, you know, maybe you're 18 or 19, you've been kind of, since you're young, you've been socialized away from STEM, away from finance, away from things that really require a lot of confidence? What would you say to people now who have those mindsets that have been ingrained in them since they're very young?
So I would just encourage them to find their own platforms. Like, I think, you know, build your own opportunities. So for instance, even giving you an example of something that could be done. Sorry, let me go attend to my two children 1 second.
Okay, well, okay. So do either Alice or Chib, do you, like, I guess Chib, earlier on you were saying like microaggressions, things like that. You know, those things are so small and they're oftentimes not from a place of malice. So how would you suggest to people to like kind of work against that? Oh, sorry, I thought it was going to take longer, Tracy.
Sorry. Sorry, did you want me to continue, or did you?
Actually, maybe Chib, can you finish and then we go back to Tracy, because I just asked the question because I thought it was going to take a bit longer.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, so things like microaggressions. Sorry, what was the question? Like, how do microaggressions? Yeah.
So when you say, like, you know, earlier on that you might be able to get to people, you might be able to speak to you because you have experienced the same microaggressions. And oftentimes people say things and it doesn't come from a place of malice, right? Mm-hmm. But it's just what they say. So how do you kind of, I think those things might compound. So how do you prevent yourself from really starting to to internalize those microaggressions? I mean, if you can even do so consciously.
The thing is that I realize that when it comes to microaggressions, I really try and like not to brush them under the carpet and really take them as like for what they are. So once I've acknowledged that what this person is saying to me counts as a microaggression, I make sure to actively address it. So I can give an example. In my Goldman Spring Week, the final presentation, we were doing a final presentation and you do it in a group. And so a boy asked me, so I was the only girl in my group, and a boy asked me, he was like, oh, do you want me to just, you know, present some of your slides, because you have quite a lot of slides. And I was like, why do you want to present my slides? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, you didn't ask anybody else to present their slides. Why would you present my slides? So I was like, no, like, it's fine. Like, you don't have to present my slides. I want to present my slides because I did my slides. I made my slides. And other examples could be things like, oh, Chib, we have a client in South Africa. You know, could you, you know, help work with them just because you might be able to relate with them more? And I told my employer, like, I never lived in South Africa, so I don't know anything about South Africa, you know? So when it comes to things like that, I like to really like address them as they are, because people might not know that what they're doing counts as a microaggression. So I really have to, you know, I think it's up to us. I mean, it's not our responsibility per se, but I think that we can help ourselves by really addressing these things and making people know that it's not okay for you to suggest that I know about South Africa because I'm Nigerian, you know, or offer to do my presentation. That's just not okay. So things like that, I just like to address them directly.
Okay, sorry, and Tracey, what you were saying earlier.
So I think you were just asking about people that didn't necessarily do the program, what they can do. And one thing I would say is just, you know, being able to create, you know, find your own platform and then just, you know, perform. So, and when I say that, I mean, that can take different shapes and forms. So at university, there's always opportunities. Is there an opportunity to lead a team or, you know, put yourself forward for something? I think people should be very conscious of their personal brand online, like their professional brand. So, you know, even, you know, making sure that your LinkedIn profile is reflective of, you know, your personality, your interests, your passions, and, you know, doing things like, I think you basically want to move from being somebody that's a very passive spectator to an active participator. So, you know, if, you know, and what I like, the analogy I use is, you know, on social media, are you the person that you're just always liking things, or are you actually the person that's shaping the debate? So are you coming up with your own content? Are you commenting? So liking is just so passive, but actually commenting and being able to create something is much more, you learn so much more. You put yourself out there, you're taking a risk. People might like it, people may not. But I think you have to get to a place where you're no longer concerned about not doing because of how it may be perceived by others. So it's more about, you know, you're putting yourself and aligning yourself to, you know, the things that you are passionate about. And it's not necessarily because you want validation from those around you. And I think that takes practice. You know, it takes practice for you to be able to, you know, build something from scratch. And yes, you might make mistakes, but then the next time you do it, actually it might be easy. So I built Her Capital, and actually that process was very similar when I was building Opportunity Central, but I had more confidence because I knew that actually you've built something from scratch before, so you can do it again. You know, when we were faced, you know, we had to turn our program virtual. I was like, well, I've built a virtual program through Her Capital, so this isn't scary anymore. So the more you do, actually, the more confidence it builds. So practice really does build confidence.
Yeah, and I guess to Alice and Chib, have you found that, you know, building your own thing, so lean in and tap into tech, have you found that that's actually helped with your confidence a lot? Or do you think you're already really confident and that's kind of continued along that line?
I would definitely say that. Sorry, Alice, were you gonna?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely say that it has helped me build my confidence, especially being in charge of a team and having to manage a team. You know, it really helps build, I'd say, like, leadership qualities, and helps, you know, to really consolidate and develop them, especially dealing with, you know, disputes, disagreements, that kind of thing, and, you know, knowing how to navigate people and deal with them individually. I think that really has helped me build my leadership skills. But not only that, kind of like things like empathy and communication as well. I think that has been really good for me.
Yeah, I might add a slightly different perspective, which is that I actually think I was probably more confident beforehand. And for me, the more experiences I hear and the more I sort of like realize how little I know about so many people's lives and experiences, I think that sort of makes me realize that I need to do a lot of self-awareness and a lot of reflection. And I think confidence tends to be quite a masculinized quality. It's made out to look a certain way and sort of be sort of quite brazen and coming across as quite brash, and the sort of just saying things when you believe them and say things when you have, which is, it's not what really confidence is and what it should be. And being confident in yourself and be able to sort of like know who you are and work out who you are before you project that to the world, I think is quite, it's a very, if you want to say it, effeminate way of looking at confidence. And I think maybe I've become more confident in that way, but in many ways I've become less confident of just saying things, and I'm actually much more conscious of listening to people and sort of just sitting there and taking things in rather than sort of going straight out there with confidence.
Okay. And do you think that like maybe now as we like see more women start to go into these like very masculine professions of finance, tech, and consulting, that actually will start to valorize or value more traditionally feminine traits more? So in the structural idea, like, you know, these are the traits that we specifically value. That's above competition, that's above confidence, it's more collaboration that are traditionally feminine.
And I think I wouldn't say that these traits are not valued in the workplace. And I think, you know, for them to be truly leveraged, I think we need to be, as women, like, I think women are different from men, and I think that should be embraced. And actually, when you do embrace it in the context of work, you actually get the best out of teams. So I think we shouldn't see it as, oh, you know, confidence is a, you know, a masculine thing, or it's really negative. And I think for me, I think confidence is being willing to try. Like, a lot of the times there's so, and particularly as we grow older, right? Like, you've grown older, you've grown wiser, people just stop trying. Like, people just say, you know what, no, I'm not going to do this because actually it didn't work last time. Or, you know, maybe, you know, somebody made a passing comment, so I'm just not going to try. But actually, you just never know what's on the other side of that fear. And that's not to say that as you know, a confident person is not scared. No, like, there's so many things that actually is really scary, really intimidating, but they're just like, you know what, let me just give it a go. And, you know, when you see it succeed, you think, wow, they're amazingly confident. But that's not to say that there were so many emotions of, you know, negative self-talk, self-doubt that they had to overcome to say, okay, I will give it a go. So I think, you know, actually, you know, what women bring to the table is really important in business, you know. And I think, you know, me personally as a mother, like, and I see it in the work, like, I can multitask, like, I do a lot, and I bring that to the workplace. You know, I can listen and do lots of different things at the same time. You know, if I'm with my husband and he's driving, he'll tell me that, oh no, I can't do this, I'm focusing on this, and that's fine. But you can just see that there's a difference between men and women. And when you bring that together in the workplace, actually, you know, so many great things can be created and done. And I think it's just important that people know what they're bringing to the table and are confident enough to articulate that, and at the end of the day, willing to try.
I'm just conscious of the time because we're almost done, but it's been a really, really interesting conversation, and I could talk about this like all day. But just for closing remarks, I want to ask each of you, like, what do you want to see in like 10, 15 years, and do you think you'll see that? So whoever kind of thinks about it first, can go ahead. Alice, do you want to start? Or if you haven't thought of it yet, you know.
I think you're on mute, Alice.
Yeah, she is.
Okay, I'm not on mute now. Yeah, I was just saying it's a very sweeping question with many answers, because there are so many changes that now look possible within the past month that maybe didn't look possible before that could happen in the next 10-15 years. And for me, I'd love to see a radical overhaul of some of the more systemic everyday things that seem to be quite apparent, and how they filter down into microaggressions and things like that. Obviously, in terms of statistics, I'd love for there to be an equal number of men and women on boards, an equal number of men and women CEOs of the top Fortune 500 companies, whatever that looks like. But also, I think I'd like to see a slight rehash in culture and in the sort of masculinity, femininity, those kinds of qualities, and see more fluidity where men feel like they're able to undertake feminine qualities and not be ashamed of it, and vice versa.
Chib?
Yeah, so similar to Alice, I really would like to see, I just think people just more educated and more aware of, struggles that many Black people face, and women face, other ethnic minorities face, and be able to see how we can acknowledge this and find solutions for it. Things like diversity and inclusion programs, these kind of things, but also even in our day-to-day relations with people of ethnic minorities and people, women and men, I just feel like we can be more empathetic towards each other and be more compassionate. I think that will definitely come with education and more awareness of the matter. So yeah.
And Tracey.
Yeah, I guess kind of, I think just in terms of my interest with, D&I, talent development, I just, I look forward to seeing a world where actually, people are able to fulfill their full potential, and it's not based on, they're being bad because you're a woman or because, you're a minority, but actually, they can fulfill their best potential and add the most value by merit and not necessarily because of these other factors that, may cause people to put them in boxes. So I think that's, for me, like, that's what I can't wait to see, that, you just have somebody that's amazing and there's no question about actually this person does deserve a promotion, rather than, have they ticked all the politics playing boxes for them to be able to move this way or that way. And that's what I hope, a lot of these conversations and dialogues will lead people to see the importance of.
Yeah, and I guess because you have been in the workforce slightly longer, so do you think that there has been a radical shift 10 years ago compared to now that you think will happen again in another 10 years, if that makes sense? Like that
I think
kind of change.
I think, and I guess kind of just in the area of race, I think, how this debate is shaped, I think will determine what happens in the future, which is why it's so important that what's happening now, you have people stepping into those places and being willing to be a voice, being willing to contribute to shape what needs to happen in terms of brokering long-term viable solutions. So yes, I think if we navigate this time well, and it's not just, based on what's happening in the news, and when, it's no longer headlines, it's forgotten about, but if we can kind of work very strategically, I think, yes, there is